Hey everyone, so today I'm going to be explaining the concept of list indexing. So each item in a list has a corresponding number to it, which we will call the index. And every item in a list has an index. And the index will always start at 0. This may seem a little weird because you have your first element, which we refer to as a first element, but it's at the index 0. It may be a little weird, so I have an example here to kind of explain that concept to you. In this example, we have list languages, and it has 5 coding languages in it, set off within brackets, where each coding language is separated by commas, and it's also in quotes, because it's a string. And our languages are Python, Java, Kotlin, C++, and Swift. So we have 5 elements in total. And if we look at our first element here, Python, it will be at index 0. As I said, the index of a list will always start at 0. So Python, despite being our first element in a list, it will be at index 0. And to the index for any other element in the list moving forward, we would have to determine that by counting up from 0. So the second element, Java, despite being the second element in the list, it's at index 1 because we start at 0, now we're counting up by 1 to 1. Kotlin, despite being the third element in the list, will be at index 2 because we started at 0, we're counting up 0, 1, 2. Third element is at index 2. Our fourth element, C++, will then be at index 3, and our fifth element, Swift, will then be at index 4. Swift is also our last element. Our fifth element, but the index for it is not 5, it's 4. In fact, if you ever so index is mainly used to allow for you to access elements in your list, though the numbering is a little strange as we've seen. If you want to access the last element in your list, you would have to do so by the index that which you determine by subtracting 1 from the total number of items in your list. So the total number of items in your list minus 1 will give you the index of your last element. So essentially, with that being said, if you have elements 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, your index range will then start at 0 and end at the index corresponding to the number that is the number of elements in your list minus 1. So 0 through 4 is your range of indexes here, whereas your elements, you would go first element, second element, third element, fourth element, and fifth element. So just like a one difference in your counting, if that helps thinking about it. So in these few examples here, we're trying to get the first element in our list. To be able to access that, we have to call on the 0th index. So the name of our list, languages, brackets 0, will allow us to access the first element of our list because our first element is associated with index 0, not 1, but 0. And if you were to access an element in the 5th index, because you might think, oh, there are 5 elements in this list, I should be able to call a 5th index. But if you do that, so if you have your name of the list here, and then index 5, if you were to try to get an element in the 5th index, the index corresponding to the number of items in your list, you're going to get an index out of bounds error because though you have 5 elements in your list and your last element is your fifth element, your last element, your fifth element, is corresponding to index 4, which you get by subtracting 1 from the total number of your elements. So the error here might have been that you want to access the, or someone, a hypothetical someone, want to access the last element of your list. You can't do that by calling the fifth index because the fifth index doesn't exist. Your last index will be 1 less than this. So if you want to access your last element Swift, you have to do languages brackets 4 to access Swift. And I don't have that code here, but just wanted to verbally explain that to you. So that's a concept of list indexing. I have one more example, and I have a list of numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This may be confusing, which is exactly why I chose it, so I can explain it to you. So we know our first index, or the index of our first element, will be index 0. This means our first element, number 1 here, will be at index 0. 1 is an item in our list. That's how we're treating 1 here. So this first item, that is 1, will be at index 0 in our list. 2, which is in our second item of our list, will then correspond to index 1 because we're counting up from 0. Our number 3, our third item, will correspond to index 2 then, because again, we're counting it from 0. Our element 4 will correspond to index 3. Our element, or item 5, will then correspond to index 4. And then number 6, or item 6, element 6, will then correspond to index 5. So our last element 6 will be in the corresponding index that's 1 less than the total number of items in our list. In this case, it's index 5. So if we were to try to access the first element of our list, in this case, our first item is the number 1, we'd have to do so by calling the name of the list, languages, brackets, the 0th index. If you want to access number 3, for example, 3 is our third element, but you have to get 3 using the second index. So the name of our list, languages, brackets 2, the second index, would allow you to get your third element, number 3. And then our last element, our sixth element is the number 6, but 6 is at index 5 because we started at 0, our last one is 5. So to get number 6, you have to call the name of your list, languages, brackets, the 5th index. Then you get 6. And the 6th index, once again, does not exist. So if you were to try to get anything from your 6th index, you would get an index out of bounds. You have 6 items, but you don't have 6 indexes. You only have, you have 6 items, but you don't have a 6th index because you started at 0 and you're going up to 5. You're not going from 1 to 6, you're going from 0 to 5. So that's the reasoning there. It may be a little confusing, but if there's anything confusing to you, I encourage you to go back in the video and maybe work out a few examples on your own. And hope this helped.